Thank you very much, Andrea. Good morning, everyone. Let me first of all, add my warm welcome to all of you to our Garden campus, and for those of you who are visiting us from afar to Singapore as well. Heritage science is a new area that we are seeking to develop in NTU. I probably need not tell you why, because that would be like preaching to the converted. But from my simple-minded perspective as a humanities person and as the dean of the college, when I see heritage science attracting colleagues from different disciplines, when I see interest from the community as well as from industry, that gives me a very good sense that we are going in the right direction. This is the second time that we are organizing a Heritage Science Conference, and I'm particularly glad that our School of Art, Design, and Media is taking the lead, organizing this conference together with NTU Paralimus. Humanities, arts, and social sciences at NTU is actually relatively new, and that actually gives us a certain advantage. Maybe we do need a little bit of the spirit of the enterprise in order to do things, well, not necessarily that nobody else has done before, but even in mainstream subjects in the humanities, there are always ways to do things better and to do things differently. I hope this conference will yield new ideas, will chart new directions, and to start this conference, there is no better speaker than Professor Harold Thwaites. For those of you who are in the field of multimedia and digital technologies, Professor Thwaites would be a well-known name. He was the president of the International Society of Virtual Systems and Multimedia for a long time. Professor Thwaites actually had a very long and distinguished career in Canada, in Montreal, before he decided to move east, going to Malaysia. And he has also done considerable work in Japan as well. He is currently the director of the Center for Creative Content and Digital Innovation at our neighbor, University of Malaya in Kuala Lumpur, and he's also a consultant professor at the Vice Chancellor's Office at UM. So we are truly, truly delighted to have him at this conference. Professor Thwaites gave a talk not too long ago at the Institute of Southeast Asian Studies in Singapore on digital humanities in Asian studies. I still remember it because I really wanted to go to that talk, but I couldn't on that day. So personally, I'm very happy that I finally have a chance to listen to Professor Thwaites. May I now invite Professor Thwaites to give his talk. Thank you.
Good morning. I'm going to turn my other microphone on because I don't like to stand in front of these things. I feel like I'm speaking to a snake. So there we go. We'll see if this one works. Ah, it does. Very good. Okay, so now I can walk and talk. I feel a little more motivated, and I think you're a little less bored. So thank you for the lovely introduction. Thank you, Andreas, for inviting me. Thank you all for being here. It's always great to come back to Singapore. This is not my first time in Singapore. How many people are here the first time? All right. Well, welcome to Singapore. When I came, I knew I was coming to Singapore, so I checked my chewing gum and I waved to all the traffic cameras as I came in. And I always feel like it's very beautiful, it's very clean, it's very precise. I feel like I'm visiting a Swiss watch. You know it's going to work. So I'm very happy to be here. And I hope that what I have to show you and share with you will shed some light on heritage science, and everything that we're dealing with in this field here today and here tomorrow as well. Elke, hello. I was recently co-chair of the 20th anniversary Virtual Systems and Multimedia Conference in Hong Kong. And a lot of what we discussed and showed and talked about there certainly revolved around heritage, digital heritage. So to begin, here's the title of my talk, which you already know because you have the program, and I think this is going to interfere with me, so I may start to walk and talk, and I may ultimately take off the jacket so I'm not so formal. The university likes me to wear this tie when I do presentations because it's, you know, the UM tie, so I've done that so I don't get fired. So when Andreas asked me to give him a topic, I said, well, how about this? And I can, you know, put together a lot of hopefully interesting things to share with the audience and perhaps get you to think about them as you listen to the other speakers over the next 2 days. So let's look at this. I always like to start with a quote, so I'm starting with this quote from William Gibson, Canadian science fiction writer. And I've always been looking for the future. This is me as an undergraduate student in Canada, out walking around the campus with an eye tracking gizmo attached to my head, beaming back the information about what I'm looking at and how I'm looking and everything else back to our little lab. If you'd like to know, I don't usually do this, but if you'd like to know what I'm going to talk about, I'm going to talk about these things. Why am I here? I'm going to talk about some theory, try and frame heritage science in the perspective of everything else dealing with heritage. I'm going to show you lots of examples of praxis. I think that's very important. I'll share some learnings, ponderings, and musings with you, and hopefully we'll have some dialogue about those, and maybe have some conclusions and hopefully lots of questions and possibly some answers. There aren't answers to everything in the world, but we'll see what we can figure out. So what about this topic? Where does this come from? It comes from here. In 2006, I got this DVD by Philip Rosedale, who is the founder of Second Life. Everybody's heard about Second Life? Yes, okay. And he goes by the name of Philip Linden from Linden Labs in Second Life. And he put the question or the topic, what do we learn if we digitize everything? And I thought, oh, that's an interesting notion. I'm going to hang on to that, and thus some of the inspiration for this talk. Also, some of the inspiration for this talk comes from this man, Marshall McLuhan. Anybody know about Marshall McLuhan? Canadian theorist. Everybody's heard of the global village, McLuhanism. Medium is the message, McLuhanism, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And he said this, and I thought, well, okay, we're now living in the McLuhanisms of my studies at university. We had to read McLuhan, and we all sat there going, what is this man talking about? He's crazy. Not so crazy, God bless McLuhan. Why am I here? As the dean introduced me, I was 31 years at Concordia in Montreal, a tenured associate professor in the Communication Studies department. I was also an associate producer of children's television and produced 240 half-hour children's programs in the course of 10 years at the Canadian Broadcasting Corporation. I've done a lot of course development, taught all kinds of bizarre and wonderful things in think media and practice media, so I understand the field, the schools, and the tensions and dynamics that are existing here at NTU and in Asia. I was the director of the Immersive Environments Virtual Reality and Audience stream at the Hexagram Institute, which revolves around the notion of research creation. BSMM, Dean of Creative Multimedia at MMU up in Malaysia for 6 years. So I've been, God help me, I've been in this field for 40 years. I figured that out this September because it was 40 years ago in September that I started my first class at Concordia, petrified in front of a hostile audience of students at 9 o'clock on a Friday morning, trying to teach them sound. And, you know, lots of colleagues, hopefully soon to be made in this room as well. So these are some of the courses I've taught or created, just to give you an idea of my very bizarre background at some times. I was originally hired to teach television production coming from CBC, and went on to do various strange things. I started the New Technology and Communication Media course at Concordia in 1989. I brought my Apple Macintosh to school because we didn't have a computer. And they said, well, why don't you try it and see if it works, see if the kids like it. So I did, and it became a major production stream in the department. I've always been involved in both research and hands-on teaching. You see me sort of with hands-on there. This is our former Vice Chancellor at MMU, the former First Lady of Malaysia, Tun Siti Hasma. This is the chairman of our, president, chairman of our board. I don't know what I'm doing, but we were launching something, so I'm doing my usual thing. I read a lot too, so all of these books go into this presentation in various ways, forms, and when I show this in Malaysia, everybody goes, because Malaysians don't read very much, which I'm trying to change. So that's why I'm here. Oh, I see, okay. I live in the science fiction of my youth, and I love to say this to people because when I reflect on what I carry in my pocket, and speaking of Star Trek, thank you for that reference, it was very appropriate. I live in the science fiction of my youth, and I have to keep pinching myself that I have more power in my hand than I ever imagined was possible, even watching the original Star Trek series. And Hollywood has always promised us that the future is going to be wonderful. It's going to be 3D, it's going to be interactive, and it's going to have robots playing with Wookiees. This was another pivotal event for me in Montreal, Expo 67. Does anybody know about Expo 67? Some of the gray-haired people or no-haired people in the room might know. I spent the summer at Expo 67. I think I was maybe 15 years old. And I immersed myself in all of these fantastic presentations that were presented at Expo. Multi-image, multi-screen, cube slide projectors that moved, all kinds of fantastic things. And I thought, wow, this is just phenomenal. What will the future hold? And I still reference a lot back to Expo 67. I include this because I've lived through the technological shifts that were, again, science fiction of my youth. Technology BC, or before computers, as I like to call it. This is the first portable video camera I ever used as a student. It was very heavy, and you had to carry it, the portable part that recorded on half-inch black and white video. Sony, God bless them, portable. Eventually, it became a little more portable or transportable. When I took photos, I used this, which I still have. It's at my mother's in the basement somewhere, and it used, of course, film. I did sound editing on a thing that looks like that. And when I edited at CBC, this is the room I was using. It was huge, and I had like 3 technicians to edit video. And now you can do it all on your desktop, and of course, we watch TV on silly things that look like that. How many people recognize this? Ah, have you used one? Yes. They're still using them. Fantastic. Every time I show this slide, I think, when am I going to get to the point where everybody goes, what is that? I'm not there yet. I'm not there yet. So when we did slides, this is what we used. It was great. You could draw on them. You could put water on them. You could be interactive. You could move them around and turn them sideways and everything. It was fantastic. That was interactive slides. And then, of course, there were these slides. And there was no fussing with a presentation at the last minute. Forget it, because somebody in the room could be working on their presentation now for tomorrow or this afternoon, adjusting it as I'm talking and adding things in or taking things out. Oh, no, no, no. You use slides to do presentation. You had to think about it. You had to pay for it. You had to be precise. And that was it. And if you wanted to do multi-image, you just got a bunch of slide projectors. Hopefully they all worked together and the bulbs didn't burn out and the slides kept moving and they linked and you did multi-image slides. Anybody ever use one of those? Probably not.
This is the first computer I used in 1974. So now you're starting to figure out, okay, oh, that old, huh? It was a PDP 1145, Digital Equipment Corporation. It had a huge whopping 512K of RAM. We thought, wow, have we got lots of memory? And this was in an undergraduate course called Computer Communication Programming. And we were the test guinea pigs. I was one of the first to take this course, and it was given by an electrical engineer. Czechoslovakian electrical engineer. So he had a very thick Czech accent, and he was an engineer talking to communication arts students. So we were all tearing our hair out. And we had to learn basic programming to do graphics that look like that. And to record them and do animation, we had to stick a 16mm camera in front of the screen because it only drew them. Then it erased them and then draw it a little bit, so click, 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 and hopefully we got some animation, like a week later when the film came back, and we thought, wow, this is not fun. And I said, no more of this until 1984. And then I thought, aha, a person-friendly computer, and we can do graphics, and we can do text, and we can do HyperCard. And that's the machine I took to school to teach the class in 1989. My little Apple Macintosh, and plugged it into an LCD display and put it on the overhead projector. So you see, it's still useful. So that brings me to the Center for Creative Content and Digital Innovation. Brand new, we're 2 years old. I was asked by the Vice Chancellor, Tansri Gauth, in late 2012 to join him back at UM, and to establish a new center to do whatever it is I thought should happen at UM. Also to renovate or upgrade the media studies curriculum. So that's more or less what I did. So the center is about this. If you want, the Facebook page is here, all of our things that we're working on, and our website is there as well. Please don't go there now. Hang on to it for later. These are some of our projects, which I will outline some of them today. And I noticed in the conference description, you were hoping for a focus on intangible heritage. We're doing lots of intangible heritage. I'll highlight some of that. If you're interested, we can talk about it later. We've done an architectural atlas project. We're involved in the Atlas of Maritime Buddhism with the Ikai group from UC Berkeley. We're doing a small project with refugee children in Malaysia, a hidden issue there for sure. We're doing a joint project with Concordia back in Montreal with a $3 million Canadian grant on the handbook, and we're doing one of the boat builders in Malaysia. We have lots of gear, and everybody goes, wow! Toys, 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 toys. Tools, very good tools. And we have lots of fantastic tools because I had a really great startup budget, so we bought very high-level gear. So we have scanners, we have replicators, we have little drones, we have all kinds of cameras and GoPro cameras, and we even have this thing, which my guys love me to show because it takes them a long time to put it together, and it's a 4K camera, and we're shooting 4K. So Andrea mentioned the post-digital era, so I thought, and it's in my abstract somewhere, I think. So I thought I should just sort of throw some things out to you about what that means, that we're focusing now more on the impact and the effects of being digital than the fact that everything is digital. And we're certainly concerned with being human, and how these technologies interact with these things, biological, cultural, spiritual systems, everything else in the humanities that rotates around being digital and the digital sphere. Nicholas Negroponte, who wrote the book Being Digital, how many people have read that? It's translated into, I don't know how many languages, almost everything. He wrote it a long time ago, and he said the digital revolution is over. And it's also about the ability to cope. At a conference once, somebody said, well, we just have to cope with it. And I said, yeah, I know, we've been coping with all this for years and years and years. But COPE is an acronym. Create once, publish, and present everywhere. And that's really important now at many universities, is getting the information out there, or mobilizing knowledge, as I like to say. Those are the references for all of that. What about the post-digital audience? oh, what a challenge this is. They want everything. So lots of wants. Want to be entertained, want it now, want it everywhere, want it my way, want to share it with others, and I want to create something. So it's a tough audience. Post-digital content, where does it reside? Well, it resides everywhere. It's everywhere. And some of it we can control, and some of it we cannot. So you can access it. This is from Anne Balsamo's book, 2011, Designing Culture. Excellent, excellent book. She's the dean of the New School at NYU. It also brings new forms of inquiry. So people are exploring things in new and wonderful ways. Locative investigation and thick mapping. It's like, let me figure out what that is. Humanities gaming, database documentaries. So the complexity and big data are becoming areas of exploration for new forms of research and creative production. And it's also very project-based. It's very difficult to do these things correctly and thoroughly without having a really good transdisciplinary team. So again, people coming together to look at things in different ways. And our projects, you'll understand how this works. Oh, what's this one? Okay, heritage. All right, everybody can agree sort of on heritage. This is sort of the official description of heritage, but it's a legacy of something that we feel is important to leave and transfer and transmit into the future in its various forms. Tangible, immovable, tangible, movable. So buildings, you can't really move them, but you can, but let's say you can. Intangible, movable, things in museums, objects, that kind of stuff. And intangible, that's a focus for this conference, and we'll see how that works out over the next day and a half. UNESCO are the official sort of body of world heritage in the world. There's 1,007 properties now as of 2015. I checked this just last week. And they're scattered around the world, and they fall into cultural, natural, and mixed. And 46 of these are in danger. And this does not stop. That number was lower a year ago. So it's increasing. The properties are increasing, but also those in danger are also increasing. So there's a huge issue. I'm going to quote another, you may or may not like Michael Crichton, doesn't matter. In 1999, he wrote a book called Timeline, and I read it. And I started to read it. It's fiction, it's science fiction. And I started to read it with a pencil and started to underline things. And this is what I pulled out of it. So he was talking about the end of the 20th century, entertainment, et cetera, et cetera. People are driven to seek authenticity. And where does that come from? Authenticity will be the buzzword of the 21st century. Well, I'm sort of going to shift it and say heritage is the buzzword of the 21st century. It's becoming more and more important. And he was looking at the past, again, from a science fiction writer or writer's point of view. And the purpose of history is to explain the present, tell us why the world around us is the way it is, and tell us what's important and why things are things we should value and what should be ignored or discarded. So I thought, I like that. I like the notion of going into the past. Audience engagement. We're doing things for an audience. Ultimately, an audience somewhere, somehow, sometime, whether it's now or whether it's going to be in the future. We're leaving this for an audience. McLuhan, God bless McLuhan, he said some brilliant things. Anyone who thinks education and entertainment are different doesn't know much about either. Okay, so heritage science. We need to look at the raw source, data, whether it's images, captures, sounds, etc., to create the content. We need to look at the way they're represented and produced and presented, and the extent to which the overall experience is meaningful to people. We're doing this for people, and it's a challenge. I decided to throw this in because my colleague and I, Miroslav Malik, who was one of the designers of the Czech pavilion from Expo 67, thus that connection. He did the multiple cube, fantastic display that was at Expo 67. Put forth this, Shannon Weaver information source and all of that stuff with a little bit of a difference. So you have an information source, whatever it might be. Here it's me standing in front of you, walking and talking and showing you slides and hopefully making some sense out of it. So those are the transmission conditions. I'm the information source. And maybe there's some responding receivers in the room. So you're thinking and trying to make sense of this and maybe watching me walk back and forth, or maybe you're doing email or other things or daydreaming about what lunch might be. The key thing here is if you change any one of these things, they have impacts on the other. Thus the chain, the links in the chain. So that if you change one of these, you're going to have an impact on the other two elements, and you have to adjust and take them into consideration in designing and presenting and representing any kind of content creation. And in a media-saturated world, heritage science must become a totally unique experience. We need to make it unique, meaningful, in order for it to have a life. Virtual heritage. I mentioned virtual systems and multimedia. In 1996 at VSMM, which was 1999, which was the third VSMM conference in Gifu, Japan, Bob Stone from University of Birmingham put this forward as a definition for virtual heritage. It was virtual everything in the late 90s. And then it became digital heritage, digital culture, e-culture, e-heritage, e-history. Enough already with the E's. Enough vitamin E, we're going to move on. So it became very, very much expanded and morphed according to what people thought the definition could be tweaked to. So I thought, okay. I took virtual heritage, digital heritage, and e-culture, and I put them into Google Ngram. And this is what I found. So they all started off in sort of a little bit of oblivion here. And then around 1998, we see e-culture pop up because everybody thought, well, that covers everything, e-culture, that's kind of good. And then we saw a crossover around middle of 2002 to 2003 between virtual heritage and digital heritage is sort of up there over virtual heritage now for obvious reasons. We're tired of the virtual everything. We're just dealing with the digital. And I also put in heritage science in there, and unfortunately it only goes up to 2008. Heritage science did not appear before 2008. So it's something new, and unfortunately Google Ngram is good for some things back into the past, but it's not gone up to 2014 or 2015. So heritage science, and this is from your definition in the outline, I think. So accessing, interpreting, conserving, and managing cultural heritage. And I thought, I think we need to add that in there. And you'll see why. You need to add capturing, because that is a crucial element. So if we put heritage science here in the snowstorm of a Canadian winter, it's all alone, hiding in the snow. It's very cold in Canada. The president was speaking about, he's from Finland? No? Sweden. He's speaking about how cold it was and the slope and hoping it would snow and fun things like that last night. It's minus 20 back where I used to live. And I thought, Singapore is so nice. Okay. So heritage science, we've got humanists and social science, okay. We've got computer scientists, engineers, physical scientists, probably, I think, in the mix. And I would add in artists, designers, creators, very important. And of course, we put them in the context of the public, the audience, receivers, because ultimately this information goes forward and multiplies, replicates, and is shared in many, many ways. Why? Because we know all of these things. It's important, very important, for recognition, protection, conservation. Management is a little blurred, public awareness and or presentation. And these are from my colleague, Mario Santana at one of the VSMM conferences. We're dealing with born digital content in many ways, and people tend to forget about this because born digital usually has no analog equivalent, or the analog equivalent has been transformed. It's replicated easily. It can be destroyed just as easily. It can be unstable, and if it's unstable, it's gone forever. So when you make a backup of your hard drive, you know, if you're really going to be paranoid about it, how many people make more than one backup of their hard drives? Ah, yes, okay. So we're worried about our born digital content, or any of our digital content for sure. It can also be very, very tied to technological obsolescence. I usually do a class and on multimedia and a little bit of the history, and I bring to class, and everybody will laugh at this, my original titanium PowerBook, and very delicately open it and press the power key, and hopefully it goes bing. It does. And then I pull out a pile of DVDs, and the students all start to chuckle. And they said, sir, like, why are you bringing this old stuff to class? And I said, well, just wait. Well, why don't you just use your new computer? And I said, you see this thing here, this silver thing? It won't play. There's no slot for it to put in there. And if I bring my external DVD drive and put this in there, it spits it back out. Why? Because the operating system on my new laptop is not the same as the one on the old one running System 9 in order to play these DVDs. And there's some really great content here. Oh, yeah, okay, fine. After the class, it's like, wow, that was really cool, and you have to keep that, and you can't, yeah, I said, well, I have to archive everything, including the technology, in order to play really interesting work that is not viewable in any other way. It will be gone very shortly. For instance, 1999, there was a project, a cathedral project, with some really nice content, beautiful images, very, very early on, 1999. And this was, you can see here, Netscape, so that, you know, times it very nicely, with some fantastic renderings of immovable heritage, gone. There was this virtual Notre Dame project done with using Unreal, again in 2000 by Digitalo Studios. Vic de Leon, a friend I know. Again, some fantastic architectural renderings and lighting and texturing for this game. Again, gone. We saw lots of these around 1999, 2000, 2001, walkthroughs of tombs, of various caves, anything that could be rendered and textured, and we saw lots of walkthroughs. This one was done by Infobyte, and we thought, wow, we can go walk back through what this tomb looked like, and you could look around, and it was all very weird and wonderful, but again, gone. Virtual Stonehenge around 1998 to 2000 at the University of Birmingham. Because they're very close to Stonehenge, they went out. They used high-resolution photography to capture and image the texture of the stones. They used geospatial mapping. They mapped the sunrises in various stages throughout history, various times of the day, so you could virtual time travel back to Stonehenge. And this was a lovely project. And you could walk through it, and the textures were the actual textures from the stones, and it was accurate to the relationships of the stones and everything else there. And if you go to Stonehenge, I was there last year in the spring, you can't get to the stones. They've kept people away now. So you can walk around them, but you can't walk through them. You certainly can't touch them. So this project still exists tenuously. This project by Eugene, who was at the University of Birmingham, he's now at the University of Nottingham, Ningbo, China. He's dealing with complexity. That's his real hardcore field right now. This was from part of his PhD that I was an external examiner for, a modeling or a virtual recreation of the Shotton Valley as it was when people lived in that particular area. And he modeled the environment, and it grew and interacted, and it was fantastic. That's still around, but not sure for how much longer. So he has become the curator of that information and that project to move it forward through what we're dealing with as far as technology is concerned. So, sensors, digital sensors. We have fantastic tools at our disposal. Some of them are old, some of them are just new versions of old technologies or old tools. And we tend to focus on these, the visual, laser scanning for dimensional. We don't use so much of this. We do some photogrammetry. And GPS for sure, we need to know where we are, and acoustic for sound environments. And this is from Addison and Mario at one of the conferences. And there's lots of stuff available out there. This is from VAST Conference 2004, sort of a map of things and how they interrelate, dealing with heritage. Certainly discovery, scientific process, dissemination, and of course interpretation and presenting it, representing it in various ways and means to a wonderful, anxious audience and public. So there's been lots of theorizing and thinking about how all of these tools interact and how we can use them and manage them. And that brings me to this. The Vanishing Virtual. My good friend Lon Addison, president of VSMM now, took over after me, thank goodness. After 7 years, it was enough. It's now Lon's turn. He was very concerned about the Vanishing Virtual. In fact, he wrote a book, The 101 Endangered Heritage Locations Around the World. And of course, we know stone is still here. Paper is mostly still here. And then we get into the mystery realm of magnetic optical, thus the DVD story. You know, those are going the way of the dinosaur, so you have to hang on to those things, and you have to keep the physical technology in order to play some of them because it's operating system specific. And then code. Well, you remember VRML or VRML, that's almost like gone. So it's very, very rapidly shifting now that we're in the post-digital age even. This story, Lon told me, and he said in 2004, he and his team went to Angkor to scan, he had a small scanning company, to scan one of the monuments. And he was shipping his equipment from California via DHL. And they phoned them and they said, Mr. Addison, are you sure you want to ship your equipment again? We just sent it back. And he said, well, no, we haven't sent it yet. We haven't been there yet. And they said, well, we just shipped exactly the same equipment as you're about to ship back to the United States. It's not yours? And he said, no. And he found out that Japan, India, and another team had already been to Angkor and scanned exactly the same areas that he was going to scan. So there was an issue that A, information wasn't shared, and B, all of this was going in very strange places and nobody really had access to it. There was no sharing. So the vanishing virtual and the disappearing digital are really key issues. Also, capturing the use of metadata, technology, et cetera. This information is really important, information about the information. If you look at it 5 years later and you say, wow, that's a really great photograph, not quite sure what it is, it sort of looks like this. If this had all of this information tagged to it, it would be much more useful, and it would have a longer life into the future. This was one of our first projects. This is a cave up in north of Kuala Lumpur. And if you go, this is what you see. And we thought, well, there has to be a better way of visualizing this poor cave because it's quite dark. And the cave people were interested. So we did this, which was high dynamic range photography. Take 5, 6, 7 pictures from the very, very darkest to the very, very lightest, and then squash them all down, and you get wonderful high dynamic range. And this was probably 3 years ago. And this is done 360 degrees, so it's interactive. You can go around and look at all the cave, brightly illuminated. You can see all of the rock formations that you cannot possibly see when you're standing there, unless you take a really big, strong torchlight. And then we went back and did it just a while ago. And this is a new version of it. And as you zoom in, and you zoom in, and you zoom in, we have much, much higher resolution now. So in the space of barely 3 years, we've been able to redo this and show it to the people that run the cave, and they're absolutely ecstatic and are interested in having it. So considerations. Some of these things all come together in all of these projects that we've been working on. Thinking about technological literacies for the future, so education, extremely important. Designing cultural experiences and having different modes of public engagement for various sorts of publics, whether they're school kids, large groups, tourists, whatever it happens to be. And mobilizing communities of interest to become communities of participation, getting the communities to participate, especially for intangible heritage. Transformative research, again from Anne Balsamo's book. I won't read that, but I'm encouraging you to go and reference Designing Culture by Anne Balsamo. But transformative research, I think, is really, really important, and I think that is something that this group and this conference can start to consider. Exploring new possibilities and new social arrangements. So that, I think, has been alluded to in the introduction. And also thinking about how the future becomes the present, the relationship between culture and innovation, interactive media, museums, and certainly university curriculum and pedagogy. How to get the kids interested in this so that it can go forward, because we've all got limited time and space. And then we need to pass it on to someone else. Public interactive, so Anne has written immensely about this, new forms and new ways of presenting this content in public. Scanning, okay, lots of scanning. The Terracotta Army has been scanned by Miralab. They scanned it, I think, around 2000, and then they used the scans to do animation. I'm not quite sure if that's the best representation or way of getting it out there, but they were probably the first to have access to the Terracotta Army in Xi'an. This is one of our projects. So we're using a Faro laser scanner as the boat building project. So we've actually, that's my one of my staff, standing in the middle of this 70-foot fishing boat, made in traditional ways, and we're trying to preserve the intangible and the tangible side of this particular heritage project. Because these boat builders build these things with no plans whatsoever. The plans are up here. And when these old fellows pass on, their knowledge will be gone. This is hot off the press. I put this in last night because they sent it to me. This is a mosque just outside of KL, the Sultan Sulaiman Mosque. It's significant for all kinds of reasons, but we were asked to digitize it because they're going to renovate it. I don't know quite what that means, but the Heritage Council in KL were very, very concerned that there would be no record of it precisely before it was done, and after it might turn into something horrible. We don't know. So we scanned it using the Faro scanner, putting it up on a crane to get all of the site. And these are just some early rendered point clouds from it. So this will result in a fully accurate, spatially rendered environment that we can explore in various forms. So these are the quick renderings that they sent me, and I thought, let me throw those in and see. Textile high-resolution scanners. Scanning. Nancy, are you here? Nancy. Oh, there she is, yes. Okay, I spoke with her last night about our textile project. And we have access to a very high-resolution scanner at from the IDE lab in Japan at University of Kyoto, which can scan up to 1200 dpi resolution. So we've started to scan some of these textiles for the textile project and post-process them. This is the scan, and this is 1 square inch of this scan. So you can zoom in and zoom in and zoom in so that the fibers are the size of your finger and see the intricacies of the pattern. And these are all hand woven by the Iban community in East Malaysia. This is a viewer using the high resolution scanning. So what do you do with the output of this stuff? How can you present it to public? So this you can choose one of the particular, this is a tapestry, and you can either zoom out, or you can zoom in and see all of the aspects of that. This is come on, choose one. There we go. This is a scan of a Chinese painting. And again, you can look at the intricacies, and you can actually see things that you can't possibly see with your eye, because you can get so close with the very, very high resolution scanning. And again, a new way, it's sort of a zooming browser, and this is done by the Lux Lab at UNSW and my colleague Sarah Kenderdine. Lots of expanding sites of capture. So capture and digitizing is rampant now because it's so accessible. This is at the Getty. So here's the Getty team. So you can see you've got a curator, photographers, a conservator. Why is the text weird? Anyway, scanning operator and some people to prepare, and a media producer. So you've got a real big team here. And they've started to scan objects. So here's a very simple handheld white light optical scanner. So you're not using lasers, and nobody's afraid that you're going to destroy the artifacts. And they're digitizing, starting to digitize some of the collection and make it available to the public in various ways. Here's Stonehenge, my gang, my friends back at University of Birmingham, back to Stonehenge. So they used aerial LiDAR to fly over and scan all of this area. Here's Stonehenge. And they found all of these new monuments, all of these little red dots around the landscape of Stonehenge, which you couldn't do before because you had to go and dig things up, and you're not allowed to dig there anywhere. They don't want holes being dug in the landscape of Stonehenge, but you can fly over it and scan it with ground-penetrating radar and get this information, find out what you can't see without digging. And they discovered many interesting things. This barrow found in Durrington Walls, and they've been able to reconstruct it from that information. So they're just starting to explore all that information from that landscape. Here's the Smithsonian. Now, the Smithsonian, if anybody has been traditionally conservative and it's just objects, millions of them, mind you, they've started to scan them and put the most popular ones online. So you can choose one of these, and it will present it on your laptop as an interactive 3D model that you can explore. They've put collections together. They've prepared tours for you. A really fascinating research. It's called Smithsonian X3D. New forms of public interactives. Now, caves. I mentioned the cave here in Malaysia. There are lots of fantastic caves. Lascaux Caves is the one that comes to mind, perhaps because it's a case study in over-visiting, and they had to close the site. So the only way you can visit it now is in a virtual representation of the site. The same thing is happening here, but in a different way. These caves at Chauvet, what they're doing is building a $67 million complex the size of a football field, and they're recreating the cave because tourists are going to damage it, the same as they did to Lascaux. When you have thousands of people go through a cave that was meant to be visited once or twice a year with torches and, for certain ceremonies as to how to go and kill the bison, those kind of things. When you have thousands of people going through here and breathing, and you turn the lights on, guess what? All kinds of weird things grow all over your wonderful cave paintings, and they gradually disappear, which has happened in Lascaux. So here they're recreating down to the absolute most accurate that they can, using scans, using high-resolution photography, and recreating. Here's an artist recreating the designs, the cave paintings from the photos, and they're building a replica of this cave so that people can go and visit it. That's what it's come down to. Personal modes of capture. Has anybody used 1, 2, 3 catch? 1, 2, 3D catch? Yes, yes, okay, it's really great. So now you can personally capture things. So this is a mask. It's in my office. So I did a really quick, with my handphone, and you can upload it to the cloud, courtesy of Autodesk. You can see there's a little bit of a hole there, and I didn't get the bottom under his chin. But you get a 3D model that you can then manipulate and browse, et cetera. So you can do this with your classes. Students in elementary school can do it to start to understand the process of capture, creation, and dissemination of objects. 1, 2, 3D Catch is now morphing into Project Memento, courtesy of Autodesk. And they talk about rip, fix, and burn. And I talk about capture, create, and communicate, more or less the same thing. You capture it, you create something with it, and then, of course, you want to get it out and communicate it or show it or share it with interested people. So you can take the original through photographs, create a 3D model of it, and of course now you can replicate it. You can just 3D print it. What about something like this? This is a very famous photo. After the Afghanistan war, they decided to point missiles at this wonderful Buddha, and it is now gone. There's just a big hole here. So the vanishing virtual, this is the vanishing real, unfortunately. Now, what could we do about it? Did anybody scan it? Probably not, because of where it was. But if you look at Google and you put in the colossal Buddha, you get thousands of images that people have taken and posted in various ways. So you've got a huge image database there. And if you're very clever, as the people at Autodesk were, they went in there and they chose particular images that were good representations of that. And using their wonderful software, they captured, they created, and they communicated back this. So now there's a 3D model representation that can be visited again of something that no longer exists, that was destroyed. So the technology is there in various ways to either capture something, digitize something that we have now, or recreate something from digital photos that we no longer have and represent it to the public. So this was shown at VSMM in Hong Kong by Tatiana from Autodesk, and I thought this is just a wonderful example, and I would bring it here to show you the potential that we now have access to. It's just a matter of creative thinking. This brings up the issue of the migration and the proliferation of aura. Bruno Latour and, I've forgotten his first name, Lowe in 2011, wrote that good quality digital facsimiles both propagate and add layers of significance and meaning to the original. Because some people go, oh, you're digitizing this, you're digitizing, the Venus, and oh my goodness, and that's, museum people get all upset about that, but they're not getting upset about it anymore because it brings people to the museum in different ways. And this fellow, Cosmo Wenman, 2014, is a master at this. And this is some of the stuff that he does in order to get objects out to the public in different ways. He does the same sort of process, takes lots of photos of them, puts them into some software, replicates them, does reverse casting. That mask is a representation of Achilles' mask. He scanned the Venus. This is in the museum. Everybody is taking pictures of Venus to take home with them. So they're capturing Venus on their handphones. So he captured Venus and made a replica of it, much smaller, and put it 200 meters away from the original. And people are still going there and capturing the replica with their handphones, but they can also pick it up and hold it. And they can download the file from his website, and if they have a printer, they can print their own. So they can have Venus at home. So it's a really interesting phenomenon. And this is something that was not possible a few years ago until the software was there and the cloud was there and obviously replicators, physical replicators are there. And there's a huge market for this. And this is copyright free because these are thousands of years old. So this is some of his collection. So he's quite a fascinating character. They're cosmowenman.com. Research and outcomes. People say, well, what about the research? And so here you go. This satisfies the deans and the provosts and the vice chancellors of universities. This is a huge area for research. It impacts all kinds of different disciplines and has a broad transdisciplinary potential impact. Who knows about After Dark? Nobody? Oh, you do. You're very well informed. That's great. Excellent. All right. Good. A data miner. Okay, After Dark was a small project done at the Tate in England. And this is what they did. Again, because they can digitize things. Hello, where are you? Ah, there's audio for this too, which is really good. This is their teaser. Thank you. Whoever turned the lights out. So that was their teaser for that. And what it was, a company of young people have designed, no, put the lights back down just a little bit, because these are quite dark. Lights were good. Can we put them back? How did that happen? Ah, there we go, okay. They designed some robots. There they are. And they've got a camera and 2 little spotlights, and they're programmed to wander through the Tate after dark, in the dark, and boldly go where nobody can go in the dark, and show you artworks in a completely different way, which is absolutely fantastic. Again, not possible just a little while ago. So this starts to open up and present a new form of public interactives. You could take over one of these 4 robots in the museum and go, and they're programmed to avoid obstacles, so obviously they're not going to bump into that and have a really nasty accident, but an absolutely fascinating way to explore content. Okay, here's a case study from something that we're actually doing. In 2011, I'm going to have to talk faster. In 2011, University of Malaya, I was still at MMU, at Multimedia University, and we had a scanner, and UM had 111 of these masks, and as you can see, not in the best of shape at the Asian Art Museum at UM. They have since made efforts to fix this. However, we thought, well, could we do a MOU and do a joint project? You've got the mask, we've got the scanner. What if we digitize these things and let's see what happens? So we did. So we started to digitize them. We chose 24 to start with. Almost all of them are done now. And at MMU, we had an interface design department who also had a 3D printer. So they were interested in taking the model and replicating it. So we scanned them, and these are half-scale replicas. So it's not bad. It's an older printer. It uses powder, but the accuracy of it is phenomenal because the scan got the watermarks, it got the writing on the inside, it got the little elastic bands because the jaws are movable. So it scanned and replicated all of that. So we've done that experiment, and it was fascinating. And we thought, okay, great. This is what we really discovered, the intangible side of this project, so thus intangible heritage. They're carved by a small community of people who live on Carey Island, about 45-minute drive from downtown KL. And they have a wonderful culture that revolves around the spirituality of these masks because they're animists. They believe in spirits of the forest and nature, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So we thought, okay, let's look into this and see what else there is that's really valuable and how can we help this community? So we did a 6-month capture and documentation project. And we went and spent time on Carey Island. We talked to the carvers, and we learned that a lot of these masks, all of the masks, have a story. How can we capture that? So we did a lot of visits and started to capture all of this. We also learned that this creates a huge amount of data. 800 plus images, 14 over hours of high definition video and sound. on everything around the masks. The carving process, the stories of the masks. The carvers don't remember the stories because they didn't pay attention to their fathers or their grandfathers who remembered the stories. So out of 110 masks, we have stories for 60 of them that the carvers can remember. The rest are lost. So we documented, we captured the stories. Each mask has a story. So this is the whirlpool spirit, a very sad story. A fisherman gets lost in the sea, never returns home. His son has a dream, brings down things to the sea, and the sea washes back his father's clothes. So some of them don't make much sense, but they're stories nevertheless, and they're attached to each one of the masks, and each of them, the mask has a character name, spirit name. So we archived all of those. So we got the stories. Then I asked a former staff at MMU, who's a wonderful graphic artist, would you be interested in helping us visualize these stories? It's never been done before. He said, I would love to do that. So we said, okay, great. Come and meet the carvers, listen to the stories, see their masks, da-da-da-da. We gave him all the stuff and said, okay, Fausen, his name was Fausen, come up with some concept sketches. So he did. Then we massaged those a little bit and said, okay. And we showed them to the carvers, and they said, okay. So he came up with some more. And then he did the sketches in charcoal on white boards, because that's the best way he thought to do them. And we said, okay, great, thank you. 6 boards for each story. The stories are 1.5 minutes, 2 minutes, et cetera, as long as it takes to tell them. So then we scanned those, and we gave them back to him, and he used watercolor techniques in Photoshop to color them. And then he gave us those digital files back, because he couldn't put watercolor on top of charcoal. It would be a lovely mess. And then we gave them to our AV producer, who took them into Photoshop and also Premiere, I think it was, and did animatics. I said, we don't want this to be an animated cartoon visualization. So be gentle. And he sliced them, and it's very, very subtle. And this is the result. It starts with the name of the story. It's told in the Maori language.
Homak laju. Dong dia. Siput dengan siput halak enong ke. Mani muh.
So the point here was to capture the story in the original language of the carvers, Maori, which is a dying language. Because they don't speak it, it's getting messed with Malay. We've translated it into both Malay and English. And we did 6 of these to start with. We chose 6 of the most visual stories that we'd been able to capture out of the 6.
Jeleng di hati, ayo, kurang dia. Dak siput na. Ki kempek habat na. Nyol anu geleng dikit ha. Sampai Hindu dah. Kalau dikit kedongnya, anu dah. Ngaku adik udah. Kedong lak hasiput. Ayo, ye na ye put siput halak. Dikit leh ha. Kalau duk ya lagi. Ki kabar tanya tanya bila du yal ke kanya sebab nama nang yal maklum leh hok lamat nan leh kedon dak lang bila du yal juga dah cip pergi gle ya talok dah sampai nah ho dan kuda temu hi kuda nah ho leh cerita muyang lak siput
So it begins with the title and ends with the actual mask, and it's as long as it takes to recite or tell that story. So we've captured that intangible heritage for the first time and given it back to the community as well. We also found when we visited the island that once a year they have a spirit ceremony in honor of ancestors and to give thanks for a good year. And they do a dance, and they do a dance that's done in a circle. So we thought, how can we capture that? Well, we borrowed this camera from my friend Sarah Kenderdine at University of New South Wales, a very temperamental, wonderful little camera called Ladybug. Does anybody know Ladybug camera? Yeah, it was designed for security. So it's got cameras around the side and one on the top. And we did a little workshop. There's Sarah with Paul Burke from University of New South Perth, because he uses the camera a lot. And it's very temperamental. You need a car battery plugged into an inverter to power the camera, plugged into a laptop to record the video, and video and audio are separate. So sort of old style shooting. And then we took it out to the woods on Carey Island to record the dance. And everything has to hide under the tripod because, of course, it sees everything, this camera, everything. And you have to run out there and go take one, clap, so you can sync the sound with the visual afterwards. And then we all went and hid behind the palm trees so that the dancers come out and do their thing without us in the image. And we ended up with this, which is the thing that I showed you or had on the screen at the beginning. And we presented it in various ways. The original capture image is the one that was on the screen at the beginning. It's 360, and if you unfold it, you get this. So as this person goes out, she pops back into the frame here. So it's shot in a 360. And we had the opportunity at VSMM to put this into a 360-degree visualization system. We had never seen it in 360 before, only this version, and it was really quite fascinating. So we were able to capture this dance, because if you go and see this spirit ceremony at February, March of the year, there are hundreds of people there. This whole venue is full of people with cameras, kids running around. It's pandemonium, and the dance goes on anyway, as well as other things celebrated in these two areas here. And the dancer said, we will do this for you when nobody else is there so you can capture the dance. We said, fantastic. So they brought the musicians, they did their whole costumes. This is Bajus, the central spirit character of this dance. And then we put 2 GoPro cameras on 2 of the dancers, so we have a perspective of dancer watching the dancer. And we put it together in this form and used it. We created this exhibition very quickly. These were the key considerations. We thought, we've got all this content. What can we do to present this in new forms of public interactive back to the public at University of Malaya? So we thought about all of those things. We had this as input to start with. So we had a couple of books. We had some archival photos. We did the stories, photos, video capture, 360 degree. That's the thing we did there. And we've done this with them. So we've done the big stars complete, and we're working on an iPad version and the video documentary, which is taking a little more time because it's lots and lots and lots of footage. So this is the COPE, the Create Once, Publish, and Present Everywhere, for this particular project. This was the design that I sort of came up with. We were given this wonderful, huge space on the 5th level of the Chancellery building. There's a university art gallery, and this was available. I booked it in May, and they said, what are you going to do? And I said, I don't know, but we'll do something at the end of the year. And this is what resulted. So we designed this as sort of a trail through the Māori culture for people to explore, and it unfolded. You had to go through it in a certain way. You couldn't walk into the middle of the gallery and go, lovely, and leave, which happens a lot in art galleries. So this is the scenography of it. This was the introductory room where we had a video about the culture. These were 2 glass rooms that we were presented with, and I thought, well, we either forget that they're there and put a wall in front of them, or we put some content in there and see what happens. We put the stories in here, so the 6 stories visualized were in there. We put 24 masks in here and built an iPad viewer so that you could go around and find the story for each one of the masks it recognized. People loved it. This was the story room. What we did with the story room, whoops, come back. We took some of the graphic motifs from Thousands drawings, blew them up big, and put them as wallpaper on the room, so you're immersed in the graphics as well as the stories. This was a 4K 84-inch screen, so people could sit really close to it. And people came and they sat. You'll see in the video when I'm done here. That was the masks. We just put them on the wall and gave people iPads to view them with. They loved it. This was another form of public interactives. We had a touch table, put all kinds of content on there, projected it on the wall. People could interact with that and explore the images, the scans of the mask, etc. This was a room for carving. We had a multi-image carving video that traced going to get the tree to the final carved mask. And we hung the two masks that they were carving on the wall so that people could make the connection between what they were watching. About halfway through, they start to point and go, ah, there's the masks. And they can take them off the wall and interact with them later. And then last but not least, this was the room with the dance video in it. This is a little, very short clip. Whoops, come back. Very short clip of compilation, come on, there we go, of the some shots of the exhibition. Unfortunately, I've got the same outfit on. Okay, so that gives you a little bit of a look at the exhibition. It was on for a month. We had over 1,000 people come to it, which was absolutely unheard of for this little minuscule or not very well-known gallery on the 5th floor of the Chancellery building at UM. And this is, whoops. I also archived it in the Google Cultural Institute on their Cultural Spot website. I got a user account and put all of the exhibition components there so it can be virtually revisited in a certain form. At least it's not lost. We were also very fortunate to take it to VSMM in Hong Kong in December, so it has been seen in another location. So these are just images of the people that came. In the Maori community, we sent a bus, and 40 of them came, including a whole pile of kids. They all sat in the story room together and watched the stories. So we had lots and lots of visitors over the month of the exhibition, and they left all kinds of comments in the comment books that we gave them. So again, we got some really good feedback. Handbook project I mentioned. This is about aging and how people's hands can tell stories. So it will combine some of our projects with projects in Canada. The boat builders. We've been working on this for a long time, and also all done by hand, all done from intangible heritage in people's, in the boat builders' heads. This is the chief boat builder, this older gentleman here. Fantastic work that they do. We also do a lot of aerial videography because of the drones. So this is some of the stuff that we've done for the PUA exhibition or for the Textiles project. This is the Longhouse, and this is a long, long way in East Malaysia to get there. Boat builders. This is something we did for EPO. So the availability, this is the architecture project. This is inside a building that we cannot go into because they're taking them away. This is the National Mosque. So with small drones, which are not easy to fly, you can put a GoPro high-definition camera on there and get some really excellent results that would have cost you a fortune to hire a helicopter to do not very long ago. The Pua Kumbu, and I'm going to end very soon. I'll skip to my closing slides. This is a high-impact research grant. It's got a lot of funding from the university. It's Dr. Wei Lin's initial project, and she came to us and said, can you help me make this something even more than what I'm doing? It takes place in East Malaysia, so you have to fly in and then with lots of gear and fly over to Cebu and get on a big boat and go up a river for 6 hours, and then get on a smaller boat and go up a smaller river for another 2 or 3 hours. And eventually you get to the longhouse that you saw in the middle of the jungle. Again, lots of trips there, and they're quite long and extensive because it's a long way to go. And again, images, lots of video. And this is all intangible heritage because it's what the women do, and they just do it. All of the dyes are naturally done. Nothing is synthetic. There's a spirituality to it. All of the designs are unique to the weavers. This is part of the dyeing process. Roots, barks, and leaves, etc. are used. The patterns are quite fantastic. There's no written documentation of it, so we've made an effort to capture as much of this intangible heritage as possible, as well as scanning the tangible heritage of the patterns. They're all hand-tied, and you can see these ladies are quite old. It's quite intricate. I won't show you all of this because it's a little bit long, but it's all done by hand, and the patterns are all in their heads. They know this instinctively through almost their bodies create these patterns. She's counting threads to set up the pattern here. They now use different types of yarn because Wei Lin has been able to give them silk as well as the cotton. Here she is. This is just a lovely little segment because she's sitting there on the floor with not a care in the world. She knows exactly what she's doing. She's using her feet to sort of manipulate the strings and the patterning of this. And she's in absolute bliss almost, focusing on what she's doing. And as you can see, it's a nightmare waiting to happen with all those threads together. So again, a wonderful form of intangible heritage that we're helping them to document and preserve. This lady is almost blind, and she still does this tying by hand. And this particular little segment here, when she gets this string attached to this, you see the arthritis in her hand. This is not accelerated video or anything. So she gets it ready, and off she goes. So fantastic. And each one of these, again, has a story in Iban, which we've captured and translated into English, and we're putting together another exhibition on this. You can see this is a very old photo, and this is a very recent photo of our last visit. They do exactly the same process as they've done for many, many generations. And that's some of the patterns. Depending on what kind of components they use, they can create. This is a traditional colors, and it depends on the time of the year whether it comes out redder or browner. And then they've also explored this beautiful yellow and this wonderful indigo color. So all of this to hopefully capture and archive and represent this beautiful process of the women of East Malaysia before it dies. So we're working on this exhibition, and we have interest. It'll probably start in Sarawak. If not, it'll start in KL. Then it'll probably go to Sydney, Los Angeles, Montreal, and Paris. So we're thinking, and we have contacts at all of those places. There's my gang. I didn't go on these things. I'm just too old to sleep on the floor in a longhouse. So they're there with the ladies. Salt makers, okay. This is another intangible heritage. They make salt in very, very traditional ways from a salt spring in the mountains in East Malaysia. And this salt is used in a ceremony for making the pua as well, making the textiles. So we've captured that because we found out about it. I'll skip this and go right to conclusions because I've run out of time and I don't want to eat into our coffee break any longer than I already have. So what do we learn? Well, we learn lots of things on the plus and the minus side. So there's certainly an increased interest in digital heritage science, all of these things, and there's certainly an urgency to capture and archive and preserve. It gives access to remote lost closed sites, as I've tried to illustrate. Certainly raises an awareness of global humanity and how are these things going to go forward into the future and create some teamwork. Certainly cross and intercultural communication, excellent ways of doing that. It satisfies or begins to take advantage of people's yearning for virtual time travel, to go back in time. What were things like before? What happened at Stonehenge? What is all of that about? Also to interest the young in digital heritage preservation. I think that's really, really, really important. And I would encourage everybody at NTU to get your students interested in this, both the science side and the human side, the technology and the intangible, really important. Proliferation of the aura of objects and things beyond the real, beyond the original, into various forms of representation. Certainly transdisciplinarity in projects, absolutely a necessity. You need a really great, diverse team. Now, born digital, this is a plus and a minus. It's great, but it can be delicate. Vanishing virtual, disappearing digital. It can be delicate, the content. Technologically intensive sometimes and can be expensive. Okay, it competes with the Hollywood perceptual stereotypes. Hollywood keeps pumping out representations of things in a digital format. And that is a reference point that gets into people's heads. And when heritage representations aren't quite as fantastic as Hollywood can make things, there's a little bit of a conflict there. So we're up against Hollywood, unfortunately, because we've seen the Roman Colosseum remodeled. We've seen all kinds of things recreated by Hollywood. Maybe not accurately, but they're there. It must be curated and versioned forward. Otherwise, it will die. And there are certain ellipses in the overall heritage value. So how do we cope with that? We can't do everything. And no matter how great and how thorough and how broad your capture is on a project, and I've shown you a couple of things that we've grappled with there, it's probably still got holes in it. And we just have to do the best we can. And it often helps increase site tourism, which is good and bad. I was going to show you an example of the Dunhuang Caves in China, where tourism for that site, 407 caves, is so high they close most of the caves, and only a few of them are open a year, because the same thing happens in caves everywhere. Too many people, too many lights, poof, the cave drawings, or the paintings in this case, are gone. Guidelines. This is from, some of them are from Digital Humanities in Practice 2012. So very important to keep documentation, have a clear idea of your users, the audience, follow established standards and guidelines. There's lots of them out there. Don't blaze new trails in different directions. Get good technical support from a university center of excellence if you have one. Recruit staff, maintain and update the interface, disseminate it, get it out there in various forms, and practice smart culture to have a heritage future. 5 key challenges I leave you with. Supporting heritage science research and innovation. It needs support. Hint, hint, hint. Mr. President's not here, but the Dean is. Encouraging transdisciplinary collaboration. This is really difficult, but I can sense this room is probably pretty good at it. But it's still going to have to be grappled with, because the scientists are over here and the artists are over there, and sometimes never the two shall meet, but they need to meet. They need to collaborate. They need to share. They need to work together. Building access and audience engagement, very important. Managing and curating, absolutely. And coping with technological evolution. Somebody's got to do it. So if you create your content, and we're very aware of that, how is it going to move forward? When I'm no longer there, who's going to take over what we've already created and continue it so people can have access to it? How are we going to share it? Very important. And some ponderings. This is like my brain exploding. How can creative approaches, creative industries, how can creative approaches extend and enhance our experiences? Okay. How can heritage science contribute to a nation's cultural heritage, prosperity? There's a huge asset here. Singapore's 50th year, heritage projects. What can it do? Social economic impacts on a global scale. How can we share these to better understand each other so we're not fighting all of the time? Because you believe one thing and we believe another thing, and heaven forbid, we should agree to disagree. What forms of heritage science approaches can help enable increased digital inclusion and participation of excluded groups? The Maori people in Malaysia are an excluded group for reasons I won't go into with this audience here in Singapore, but they're an excluded group. They're very marginalized. So us doing that project and presenting it at University of Malaya was a little tense. I was a little tense. Nobody else seemed to be intense. They kept saying, stop worrying, it's fine. And I said, well, you know. But it was great, and it really, really helped them. And I'm glad we did it. And last but not least, how much information is enough? How much is enough? Can it ever be enough? Because we can, we should, we do, we would. Whoops. I will leave you with this closing quote. There we go. Oh, no. Come back, closing quote. Ayo. Sorry about that. The buttons on this thing are way too small. Okay. Last closing quote. Come on. I did it again. Okay. There we go. We shape the destiny of the future with stories about the past by the effects of our imperfect presentations on the enthusiastic minds of the public. Benjamin Britten said this at VSMM in 1996. And I always remember him saying this, and I thought, yes, that's what we're doing. And this visual is from the Luxagon project, which is a recreation of the Lascaux caves. So they're doing a very similar thing, and they're embedding different forms of multimedia into the representation of the cave paintings. Because it's closed, you cannot see them anymore. And this is my last slide. We are swiftly moving at present from an era when business was our culture into an era when culture will be our business. God bless Marshall McLuhan. And with that, I hope those Chinese characters are correct. They were in Taiwan, and I hope I copied it right. Anyway, so thank you for your patience, and hopefully we can talk about this. I'm here, I'm here all week. I'm here until tomorrow night, and certainly free to. Yes, I'm sorry I went so long, but it was very difficult to time this thing because I really wanted to give you some stuff.
An excellent introduction to the conference, and we are fully engaged now. We need some prompting, and we'll be back here soon. Thank you very much.
Thank you.